Jim Chalmers' first budget was a mixed bag of caution and uninspiring economic management. In fact, it was disturbing with its outlook forecast of despair, especially given the timing of the latest inflation figures, because they've done nothing to make life for Chalmers pleasant. The inflation figures proved uncomfortable for Chalmers to actually sell the Treasurer's traditional big budget sell at the National Press Club the day after revealing the government's fiscal numbers and forecasts. We have current annual inflation figures that are already running at 7.3% and will look to rise further. And there's still more work for the Reserve Bank to do. And not since 1990 has the annual inflation rate been so frightfully despairing. And for Chalmers, well, he says that the test of a budget is responding to the global challenges and also the challenges at the kitchen table. So what does it actually mean for us Australians? Well, it means that come Melbourne Cup, the focus won't only be on the horses, it will also be on the size of the next interest rate rise. This year, the rate rise has gone from 0.1% to 2.65%, with the budget predicting that it's going to peak at 3.35% in the first half of 2023. And there are also some economists that are predicting it could rise even higher. And here's the kicker. Rather than inflation rising in the September quarter at the 1.6 average forecast, the RBA's preferred underlying annual inflation rate, taking out the largest rises and falls, it hit 6.1%. It's the single biggest jump since the Australian Bureau of Statistics first began publishing the series in 2003. It's also alarmingly widespread and particularly evident in non-discretionary goods such as food and housing costs. Chalmers, who describes inflation as public enemy number one, acknowledges that this is at the higher end of market expectations, but he says not dramatically. Clearly, in volatile times, he says, forecasting is a difficult business to be involved in, but what we saw today doesn't substantially change our expectations. Now, this budget predicts consumer price inflation to peak at 7.75% this quarter, before easing back to 3.5% by mid-2024. But significant risks remain about the inflation outlook, and it could still rise by a full percentage point by this December, causing Australians to be even more cautious about their spending, and that could lead to even lower economic growth. The cost of electricity and gas and the impact of natural disasters has the capacity to be a little worse than the budget anticipated. Now, even if petrol prices have come down a little in the September quarter, any relief on petrol prices will be temporary, and with floods and wet weather remaining an issue, they are impacting on our food prices. Nor will there be any immediate respite from energy prices. Instead, the budget predicts an alarming increase in electricity prices of over 50% over 2 years and over 40% for retail gas prices. And that may well still prove optimistic. Chalmers used the word confronting to describe such grim and harsh news. So what about entertaining the idea of financial packages for households and businesses? That's not a consideration yet for the Treasurer. He's holding out the alternative of imposing additional regulatory steps on the gas industry as a better avenue than sending people checks. And Albanese and his government are madly trying to work out what is even possible given the complexity of the energy market and the need to avoid yet more unintended consequences. Gas companies are even now warning further government intervention would only scare off much needed investment in additional supply, with the Treasurer arguing that there's almost no distinction between the global and the local market, as demonstrated by the war in Europe, creating havoc in global energy markets and pushing up domestic prices. But Australia is an independent energy nation, and we need to ask, why have we tied ourselves to the international energy markets? Australians won't accept the spin as Chalmers tries to backpedal or weasel his way out of failing to protect Australian consumers and households. And with Chalmers emphasising that the worst thing that this budget could have done was to follow the temptation to provide greater cost of living relief at the cost of adding to inflationary pressures. Now, according to Chalmers, any cost of living measures need to be carefully targeted and timed and designed to deliver the right kind of result. He says indiscriminate spraying of cash would have made our inflation challenge even more profound and more prolonged and ultimately more painful. Chalmers, as he normally does, chided the coalition's failure to invest adequately in everything from skills to clean energy to the moral imperative of gender equality, while leaving Labor to manage a $1 trillion worth of debt. But that political buffer of blaming the previous government for current and future problems is getting pretty thin, particularly now Labor has delivered its own first budget. So while he indicates this effort is merely the first of several future budgets, the pressures are rapidly increasing and the chimes of inflation are tolling loudly.